Good morning. Wow, that was a very long introduction. So it's just a pleasure being here. Thank you so much to JIMS for inviting me. And no, I don't expect this to be a classroom session. I expect this to be more of an interactive session because I was just sharing with Mr. Agrawal that when my son joined at the age of 18 in a college in the US, the first thing we were told is, you as parents realize that he's an adult. So I realize all of you are very grown-up adults and very responsible members of our society, and you are representatives of the youth power of which India is very proud. So whenever you think of anything else, please remember that your responsibility. You are all learning, but most importantly, we are very proud of you, all of you, who are really delving into this very important area of maybe logistics, but more than that, as was mentioned by my speaker before me, please open your minds. There's a huge world out there. If nothing else, my brief resume must have told you that there's a lot of possibility, a lot of potential to do work in various aspects. So there is a lot of scope for that. So I would really encourage you that please use your young minds to really build India. This is a beautiful time to be born in India and to be a young person in India. I wish I could go back 50 years and I could be your age, or maybe, younger, and then, live in this particular time. So the Honorable Prime Minister, who happens to be the chairman of NITI Aayog, by the way, it's called the National Institution of Transforming India. So some of you may have heard of it already. So we are charged with the task of working on policies. So logistics is one of them. I am very attracted to rush into the specific topic of logistics. But I would refrain because I've seen a large number of luminaries who are going to speak specifically on logistics, and I also have in mind that all of you are going to be having logistics pouring out over your ears by the end of the evening. So I will not really... Let me take this opportunity to share with you some of the areas in which we, at the National Policy Think Tank for the government, how we interact with the government. What are the major areas, policy inputs which we look at? Will that be all right? Okay. So first and foremost, let's look at, whenever we talk about logistics, whether it be in India or the world over, etc., they are playing out in a certain context. Now let's look at the global context first. So there are many areas. I mean, you can always pinpoint something else, but I picked up a couple of them. So first and foremost, if you look around, you'll come across a trend called de-globalization. Some people call it slowbalization, slow globalization. So what does that mean? It means existing trade relationships, existing international relationships, increasing the trade and geopolitical institutions world over, which have been established for a long time, where China used to be the dominant country, it used to be the major supplier of the world, India continuing to do its bit in services sector, etc. All that has rapidly changed. Right? So that is something of a reality. And if we think that it's not going to impact us, each and everything which we are sharing today is going to impact us right here in India. It is impacting us, it will continue to impact us in a much bigger way. So first is this de-globalization. Second aspect is again decarbonization. The whole world is pushing ahead to decarbonize. Whether it be steel, whether it be manufacturing of aluminium, whether it be manufacturing of fertilizers, whatever it is, we have to now look at our carbon footprint, whether we like it or not. Many of you may have heard of something called CBAMs. CBAM, it's a European law. It's not been made in Indian Parliament. It's not been discussed in India. It was created, it was done by the European Union. CBAM. Now, it's a border adjustment mechanism, a border adjustment tax on carbon. Whose carbon? The carbon which we are producing. So our steel exports to the European Union are going to be impacted by laws which are not made in India, but by laws which our large importers are going to be making. So we have to be absolutely aware of them. That decarbonization is something which the world is accepting. And so is India. And I'll come to this point a little later. India has also put a very stiff national commitments. We have taken upon ourselves that 50% of our total energy needs will be now met by renewables. So how are we going to meet all this? All this is going to bring about a major shift in the way we do business, the way we think about business. The third trend is digitization, right? So this is something which all of you are aware of. I don't think there'll be anybody in this room without a mobile phone. I mean, since all of you are adults, so I'm sure all of you have mobile phones. Earlier on, it used to be a luxury. When our parent gave us our first mobile phone, we used to think, oh, now we have really grown up, I've got a mobile phone. Now every child has got a mobile phone, right? That's something which we are aware of. But you know the kind of penetration we have of mobile phones in the rural parts of India? We have got 1.2 billion connections. 1.2 billion connections. So many people are connected via the mobile phone. 80% of the entire country is already transacting. And close to 50% of it, rather 47% of it is coming from the rural areas. So even if you are looking very specifically at the logistics part of it, please keep in mind, the rural demand is going to be what is going to be driving everything in the future. And they are really, really very crucial to the country's growth. So digitization is something which is changing the way things work. In fact, Mr. Agrawal was sharing over tea that how his particular business has undergone so much of change thanks to GST and thanks to digitization. Now everything is on, the e-way bills are available on digitization, no more carrying copies, so much simpler. So it is bringing in so much new kind of demand, so much new kind of pressures. And of course, disruptions. There's disruptions arising out of conflict. So we know about, first the COVID pandemic hit, that brought in a huge amount of disruption. Then, of course, the Ukraine crisis, and now we are looking at the Israel-Hamas war, and let's hope it doesn't spread. But international events which are much beyond our borders are directly impacting us. So this is the global scenario, and I've just picked up 4. There can be many more you can think of. These are impacting us every day. They are going to be impacting India's growth. They are going to be impacting how we do business. For example, when the Ukraine crisis hit, can you recall what are the major commodities which were important to India which were affected? Petroleum is one, fertilizers, right? Another, and then food supplies. Ukraine and the world are major suppliers of food. Now, many of you may have been following the G20 very carefully, and you have realized one thing very interesting, that now India is a major power, not just economic power, we'll come to that part, but we are a major voice. So whenever India chooses to come up with a policy of, let's say, we will not export food grains, it impacts the globe. No more can it be said that, oh, India's demand doesn't matter. If India chooses to import certain things into the country, it changes the way the whole world starts the supply chains of that particular product. Mobile phones is one. Not long ago, and at NITI Aayog, we and I personally was quite involved in this, the production-linked incentive scheme for mobile phones, among others. Today it's revolutionized, right? We used to be a net importer of mobile phones, and now we're exporting close to $3 billion worth of mobile phones. And Apple phones, I'm not talking about just low-end phones, I'm talking about top-level Apple phones. So they have brought in their own challenges of logistics. So please understand, things are changing very rapidly, and we as young people, all of you, have to be absolutely clued into this, right? It's very easy to start looking at very carefully at stuff. That's good. We may have some course material to complete, but please read and expand and discuss. So I really congratulate JIMS for organizing this particular seminar. It allows all our young people to really open their minds. Now, all this we see, but how is India responding to it? Now, India today, as we all know, is considered to be one of the brightest spots in the world in terms of economic growth. The whole world is looking at it. So long the time in the 80s and the 90s until 2000s, people used to look at China, because China's growth was driving the global growth, maybe till 2010, but not since then. Now everybody is very keenly looking at India's growth. When India grows, the whole world grows. If India slows down, there will be a major slowdown in the global economy. So many countries were talking about recession and this is going to happen, that is going to happen, inflation zyada ho jayega. India was not looking at that. India was, we were busy organizing the World Cup. So we are enjoying ourselves. Please understand, All this is because of the correct policies and of the specific nature of the dynamics which is playing out in India. So we have to recognize our role. So the Prime Minister speaks in terms of Vishwaguru. It's true. Today we are a global leader. Those of you who follow the G20 would realize that the whole, many of you may be following it, but we were closely entrenched in it. When the final communique had to come out, there were so many oppositions. But then everybody decided that the communique has to come out because the Delhi Declaration cannot fail. Why? Because everybody realizes the role which India plays in the global community. So there is a new recognition about India, and that's why I said we are very, very fortunate to be young people, the youth power of India today in the Amrit Kal. Now, India has increasingly also become a country where we are forming a lot of alliances. Many of you must have heard of free trade agreements, right? Now, the free trade agreements we did when I was with the Commerce Ministry, and we had engaged with Japan, China, and Korea. And I have no hesitation in saying we didn't do a very good job because our trade balance really became more adverse. The Japanese and the Koreans were able to gain more advantage. But that was in 2010 and 11. In 2023, we have learned a lot of lessons. We have built a lot of capacity. So today, we are actively engaging in a lot of free trade agreements. We have signed one with Australia. We signed one with UAE. And now we are looking at something very close to with the UK and with the European Union, with Canada, with many other nations with which we actively engage, even though they are a much developed country. They are much stronger economies today, but we are engaging with them at equal terms. So please understand, this is a new way in which the country is engaging the world. So we have to be prepared. The industry many times used to be asked, should we engage? Industry's response was to no, don't engage. Best to keep them out. Don't let them come in. If they come in, they will swamp us. We will not be able to compete. Now the industry is raring to go. They say, yes, let them come in, but we want their markets also. So we are looking at markets in Australia, we are looking at markets in Europe. We want our steel, our fertilizers, our products, our apparels to be sold in Europe, in the United States. So now they are pushing the government to get them more market access. Okay? So there's a very different way of thinking which is not only in the government but in our industry, in the entire population is now thinking ahead of engaging the world in a very positive way. That's a major shift in the way we are thinking. We always speak about demographic dividend, right? And demographic dividend will be possible only we have young people like yourselves who are well educated, with open minds, raring to go, right? And of course, well skilled, their capacity is fully developed, and of course in very good health. So we would like the youth to really be powered by all this. That is what will really make our young population really work and really encash the demographic dividend of which India speaks about. We also have, for example, the largest startup ecosystem. And I would really urge JIMS to do that, to really push our young people to think in terms of being job creators. How many of you are thinking in terms of creating your own startups? It's very, very important. India is the third largest hub for startups. And many of you who may be interested are free to come and connect with us in NITI Aayog. We have the Atal Innovation Mission, which actually helps a lot of young people to have their own startups to start, right? So please think in those. That innovation is also a very important factor in which how India is going to engage with the business world. I've already mentioned about climate change, and because this is very important, because India's growth trajectory is not going to be like that of China. Many people compare India and China. China did this. China has suffered from a number of things. China, did not ever care about the climate. So we are all paying the price. Can you imagine if India were to develop in the same way China does? The whole world will not be able to take it. We are already talking in terms of, in COP26, we had decided certain goals. Now we are looking at COP28, which is coming up next month. So all these things are going to impinge upon how transportation is going to work, how our capital expenditure is going to be invested, what kind of transport structures we are going to build, what kind of logistics are going to come up in the country. All that is going to be directly impinged by India's commitments, which we take in the international organizations dealing with climate. So climate is a very important thing. ESG, I'll not dwell on it more, my further speakers will be speaking about it. Please keep in mind that that is going to impinge on how we are going to be looking at doing business in the years to come. If you look at creation of global value chains and regional value chains, these are not only driven by policy, these are not only driven by diplomacy, these are actually driven by industry. So we have to be a part of the global value chain. In fact, one of the major lessons we have learned from China is the fact that they have been a part of the global value chain. Many of you have heard about the Barbie doll experience. China was contributing 3% by value to the creation of a Barbie doll. But for every Barbie doll which sold in the world. The same thing was again done for mobile phones. So every Apple phone which was created, they had first 6 to 7% by value. And that increased to more than 50%. So the important part is even today, India is replicating that in many ways. But that is where the logistics will come in. And we are looking at logistics not just within the country. Of course, how to move goods from the ports and the airports to where the manufacturing is taking place, but internationally. I can go into energy, for example. Energy, the country's energy needs are going to be massive. They are going to be growing by leaps and bounds. As the country progresses, the energy demand is going to go up. The logistics of energy are going to be absolutely amazing. Not just by shipping, not just by pipelines, but what are the policies which govern it? So I'm just touching on these topics. I'm not going into details of it. But important thing is the government initiative which you need to keep in mind are the performance-linked incentive initiatives, which has really changed a number of manufacturing areas. Similarly, if you come to the national infrastructure pipeline or the national monetization pipeline, these are revolutionizing the way in which infrastructure is being created in the country today. Of course, there's been a huge push in terms of creating infrastructure in the country, but along with that, it's not just the roads and the bridges and the railways and the airports which we are building. The important thing is also the policy which is coming in. So when you talk about Gati Shakti is not just an infrastructure portal, it is also a portal which helps you develop better policies. Our infrastructure costs are today in 13 to 14%, which have to come down to less than 10. China is looking at 8%. Can you imagine the gap? Which industry would like to suffer a gap of 5 to 6%? So that is a major area which directly impinges on what you're studying. So I would encourage you to please examine all this, and as you do this symposium today, and I congratulate you once again, and JIMS, thank you so much.